From having 96% of your body covered in hair to turning permanently blue, today we look at 20 people that exist and existed. A tumor over 100 pounds. Mercedes Telemonti had a 132-pound ovarian tumor removed from her body. The tumor grew for 5 years before she went to see a doctor. So why did she wait so long before visiting a doctor? Well, her initial thought was weight gain, so she didn't pay much attention to the growth. But her daughter was convinced there was something wrong and begged Mercedes to see a doctor. It took a surgical team 4 hours alone just to remove this enormous tumor. This guy's skin turned blue. 57-year-old Paul Carrison had turned himself blue permanently. He was widely recognized after an interview on NBC News Today, explaining his situation. Paul suffers from a condition called argyria. It's caused by a heavy usage of colloidal silver, which he took for his skin condition, but the remedy didn't help. Even though Paul turned blue and there is no way of reversing it, he still continued taking the colloidal silver. Paul passed away at the age of 62 by a heart attack, and it didn't seem to be related to the silver intake. Calcified fetus. Yes, you heard it right. It's a mummified baby. This is a story of a woman in 1955 that fled from the hospital right in the middle of her labor. She escaped the hospital because after 48 hours of labor, she was unable to deliver her child, and the thought of her child dying had her running. Almost 50 years later, her undelivered child had calcified and doctors had to remove it. The forehead nose. A 22-year-old Chinese man had a new nose grown on his forehead in order to replace his old one. His original nose was damaged from an infection following a car accident. Doctors used a tissue expander to grow the second nose on his forehead. When the nose is ready for the transplant, a cartilage from the man's rib will be used for the structure of the nose. Forearm ear. Stellark is a performance artist whose work involves robotic and modern technology that's integrated with his body. In 2006, the 61-year-old man had a lab-grown ear implanted into his left forearm. He also hopes to have a small microphone implanted into the third ear so others can hear what it is hearing. He said that art should be more than just illustrating ideas. Extra fingers. 37-year-old Cuban man Hernandez has 24 fingers and toes. This condition is more common than you think. The odds are 1 in every 1,000 births. Hernandez's fingers and toes are perfectly formed, unlike most. He is able to make a living climbing coconut trees with his incredible hands and feet. He is thankful for his hands and feet, which he sees as a blessing. She cannot gain weight. Lizzie Velasquez has a rare medical condition that prevents her body from storing any kind of body fat. This means she can never gain any real weight no matter how much she eats. Lizzie was born 4 weeks prematurely and only weighed 3 pounds. At the age of 23, she only weighs 58 pounds, even though she eats 6 times a day. Her condition is so rare that only 2 other people in the world are known to have this condition. A tennis-sized tumor. Eric Mulger, a 62-year-old man from England, had a tumor the size of a tennis ball on the left side of his face. Doctors were left with no other options but to remove a chunk of his face to save his life. With the help of 3D printing, doctors were able to create a prosthetic wear to fill in the gap on his face. This allowed him to drink and eat normally. Living with half a head. Behind the wheel while intoxicated, Carlos was in a car accident that sent him flying out of his windshield headfirst onto the road. Doctors were able to save his life at the cost of a large portion of his head. A great amount of flesh and bones were removed from his skull in order to keep him alive. Man with half a body. In 1995, Pang was in an accident where a freight truck cut his body in half and managed to survive. He spent almost 2 years in a hospital, undergoing countless surgeries and strenuous rehabilitation. Even with only half a body, he is learning to walk again with help of a special mechanical device. Cheating death. Alcide and his brother were washing windows on the skyscraper, standing on a leveled platform high in the sky. At an instant moment, the platform they were standing on suddenly collapsed. They fell from a 47-story building. Alcide miraculously survived with only broken bones, and amazingly enough, he is still able to walk. However, his brother was not that lucky. Real life Superman. 35-year-old Herbert Chavez has 19 surgeries over the course of 16 years to make himself look like his favorite superhero, Superman. Herbert has several parts of his body worked on. This included a nose job, jaw realignment, lip liposuction, and even pec implants. These procedures were not cheap. He spent over $4,000 US, which is 2 years of average income in the Philippines. Herbert believes it was money well spent. In his hometown, he is very popular and uses his powers to influence good behavior to children by doing good deeds. He plans to have other surgical procedures in the near future so he can look exactly like Superman. The Armless Lady. 35-year-old Linda Bannon has a rare genetic condition that makes her armless. She suffers from Holt-Oram syndrome that affects about 1 in 100,000 people. Although Linda is missing 2 arms, she stays positive and won't allow the condition to slow her life down. She has a normal life and uses her feet as if they were her hands. She can complete daily tasks like brushing her teeth, changing clothes, and eating with a fork without assistance. She's happily married with a son that also shares the same genetic condition. Man with constant orgasms. 37-year-old Dale Decker from Wisconsin experiences up to 100 orgasms a day that is out of his control. Dale suffers from persistent genital arousal syndrome. He orgasms on a daily basis that occurs randomly throughout the day. Dale did not have this condition to begin with until 2 years ago. This started when he had a disc injury in his back. Doctors stated that trauma to the pelvic nerves can trigger this kind of sensitivity to the area. Dale is also the first man to speak out about suffering from PGAS. She cannot smile. 46-year-old Elisa has Mobius syndrome, rendering her unable to make facial expressions. Essentially, her face is frozen in a single expression. She has ambitiously attempted to make other expressions, but her disorder won't allow it. During Elisa's early childhood, her family did not understand why her face was always blank. It was not until she turned 16 that they went to see a doctor about the situation. Soon after the visit, she went under surgery that allowed her to gain some control of the muscles on her face. The surgery did help, but she would have to bite down to show a smile. Man with a missing eye. Billy Owens had lost his eye due to a rare form of cancer that affected his nasal passage. The cancer has spread too far, forcing the doctors to remove half of his face with a 10% chance of survival. With all the odds against him, he survived the procedure, leaving him with one good eye, but the inability to smell. Owen now has a career as a zombie actor and a sideshow performer. He also claimed that the whole ordeal had changed him for the better. It's incredible how Owens can stay so positive after a near-death experience. Born to arm wrestle. Matthias was born with a rare genetic defect that made his right forearm bone 33% larger than his left. They call him Hellboy or Popeye. He is an arm wrestling world champion, winning over a dozen championships in the past 14 years. Giant Man. A Ukrainian man named Leonid was believed to be the world's tallest man alive during his time. He stood 8 feet and 5 inches tall. He was never formally measured by the Guinness World Record because he was too shy. Sadly, he died at the age of 44 in 2014 from brain hemorrhage. Man covered in hair. Yu Zhenwan is China's hairiest man with 96% of his body covered in hair, a record only surpassed by the Gomez brothers as having 98% of their hair covered. The hair has caused a considerable amount of problems for the 26-year-old. For instance, Yu had multiple surgeries to remove hair all over his body parts, including his ear since it was affecting his hearing ability. Yu's condition has not held him back as he aspires to be a rock star because of his passion for singing. The dirtiest man. 80-year-old Almohaji has not showered in over 60 years. He's afraid that cleaning himself will make him sick. What's bizarre is that he claims to smoke animal feces instead of tobacco. He also dislikes fresh food. Instead, he eats rotten meat. Almo lives far away from society and stays in isolation.